The words sliced through the cheerful chatter of the family barbecue, sharp and venomous. "She's using him, you know. It's all for the money." It was Brenda, my husband's cousin, her voice a conspiratorial whisper to my son, Mark. They thought I was out of earshot, busy saying my goodbyes. My back was to them, my hand on the handle of my car door. Using him. The him was my Richard, the man I had spent 34 years building a life with, the man now lost in the fog of a disease that stole his memories, but not my love. My fingers tightened on the cold metal. A wave of nausea, hot and acidic, rose in my throat. I didn't turn around. I didn't give them the satisfaction of seeing my face crumble. Instead, I opened the door, slipped into the driver's seat, and pressed the start button. The car hummed to life, silent and electric. As I pulled away from the curb, I glanced in the rearview mirror. Brenda was staring, her mouth agape, her eyes wide with a strange mix of shock and envy. She had frozen mid-sentence, watching me drive off in my brand-new crimson-red second Tesla. Richard and I weren't born into this. The Teslas, the sprawling house with the infinity pool, the portfolio that my lawyer called generational. It was all forged in a crucible of sacrifice. We started in a cramped Palo Alto apartment in the late 80s, fueled by cheap coffee and a shared dream. He was the visionary, the charismatic salesman who could charm investors with a single PowerPoint slide. I was the architect, the one who worked until 3 a.m., coding the software, building the operational systems, and managing the finances with a ruthless efficiency that kept us afloat. I was the co-founder, the C-suite executive, the silent partner whose name was on every patent and incorporation document. For 20 years, we were an unstoppable team. While other women in our emerging social circle were planning charity galas, I was negotiating multi-million-dollar contracts in Tokyo and Frankfurt. While they were redecorating, I was debugging server code. Our children, Mark and Chloe, grew up seeing their parents as equals, as partners in a grand adventure. Then the adventure began to change. It started subtly. Richard, my brilliant Richard, started forgetting things. A client's name, the key to our own front door. The initial diagnosis, early onset Alzheimer's, was a death sentence for the man I knew. My role shifted overnight. I quietly stepped back from the company's daily operations, hiring a trusted CEO to steer the ship I had built. My new job was managing Richard's world, making it smaller, safer, and less confusing for him. The family, who had always viewed me with a certain detached awe, now saw an opening. They saw Richard's vulnerability, not his legacy. My sacrifices were reframed not as a wife's devotion, but as a caretaker's duty. The years I'd spent building our empire were forgotten. I was no longer Eleanor, the tech mogul. I was Eleanor, Richard's poor wife, the one left to handle the mess. My days became a blur of medication schedules, doctor's appointments, and calming his panicked episodes. I would sit with him for hours, holding his hand, showing him old photographs, trying to coax a flicker of recognition from his vacant eyes. I did it out of love, a deep, abiding love that transcended memory. But to his family, my love was invisible. They only saw the money. They saw the fortune he could no longer manage, and they saw me, the gatekeeper. They didn't see the woman who wept in the shower so her husband wouldn't hear. They didn't see the woman who had traded boardrooms for waiting rooms. They only saw a woman with a checkbook, and they began to wonder when it would become theirs. The shift was insidious, a slow poisoning of the family dynamic. It wasn't one big fight, but 1,000 tiny cuts. At Sunday dinners, my son Mark would start directing all financial questions to his uncle, Brenda's husband. "Uncle Jim, what do you think about the market?" Dad would have shorted this. My own insights, honed over decades, were ignored. If I offered an opinion, Chloe would give me a pitying look and say, "Mom, don't worry about it. We've got it handled." I was being gently, lovingly, and completely pushed out of my own life. The ultimate humiliation was the trip to Italy. It had been Richard's and my dream to rent a villa in Tuscany for a month when we retired. After his diagnosis, the dream died. Then, one day, Chloe announced it over a family group text. "Surprise! We're all going to Italy for Dad. A last big trip." My heart seized. They had planned it all without me. The villa, the flights, the itinerary. I was just another name on the passenger list. When we arrived, the villa was beautiful, but my room was a small, dark annex next to the kitchen, while Mark and Chloe and their families took the grand suites with balconies overlooking the vineyards. "It's better this way, Mom," Chloe explained, not meeting my eye. "You'll be on the ground floor, so it's easier for you." Easier for me? I had run marathons. I had climbed half of Kilimanjaro. Now I was being treated like a frail invalid. Every day was a fresh paper cut. They would make dinner reservations at a place they knew I disliked. "Oh, Mom, be a sport. Everyone else loves seafood." They'd go on a wine tour and forget to wake me from my nap. I'd wake up to a silent house, the faint scent of their perfume and cologne lingering in the air. The worst was when they would talk about Richard in the past tense, right in front of me. "Dad would have loved this view," Mark would say, his gaze distant. They were mourning a man whose hand I was still holding, erasing me from the equation, as they did. One afternoon, we were strolling through Florence. Brenda pointed to a leather shop. "Chloe, you should get that briefcase for your husband. The kind of thing your father would have appreciated. A man's accessory." She looked pointedly at my simple, functional handbag. The implication was clear. I was no longer part of that world of power and success. I was just the widow in waiting. I felt myself shrinking, becoming a ghost in my own family portrait. The sun was warm on my skin, but inside, I had never felt so cold. The breaking point arrived at the Santa Maria Novella train station in Florence. The plan, which I was merely informed of, was a day trip to Cinque Terre. The station was a chaotic symphony of screeching wheels, echoing announcements in musical Italian, and a river of people flowing in every direction. I was tasked with watching our luggage, while everyone else went to grab coffee and pastries. A mountain of suitcases stood guard around me, isolating me on a small island in the middle of the concourse. I watched them, my children, their spouses, my grandchildren, laughing together at the coffee bar. They looked like a perfect, happy family. For a moment, I saw them through a stranger's eyes, vibrant, wealthy, carefree. I was the gray smudge at the edge of the frame, the keeper of the bags. Mark finally came over, not to help, but to give instructions. "Okay, Mom, the train is on platform 8. It leaves in 15 minutes. We're just going to use the restroom quickly." He patted my shoulder with the same dismissive air he used with the villa staff and walked away. I started maneuvering the heavy suitcases towards the platform, a slow, arduous process. My heart hammered against my ribs with a strange sense of dread. By the time I got the last bag to the designated track, I saw them. They were already on the train, finding their seats, stowing their small carry-ons in the overhead racks. Chloe saw me through the window. She waved, a bright, false smile plastered on her face. She held up her phone and mouthed, "We'll call you." The train whistle blew, a long, mournful sound. I stood there, breathless, on the concrete platform. The doors hissed shut. I saw Mark look at Chloe, a flicker of something, guilt, annoyance, in his eyes before he settled back into his seat. He didn't look at me again. The train began to move, slowly at first, then gaining speed, pulling my family away from me until it was just a red speck disappearing down the tracks. They had left me, not by accident, not in a rush. They had planned it, leaving me with 8 enormous suitcases and a ticket for a train that was already gone. I stood motionless, the noise of the station fading into a dull roar in my ears, the weight of it all, the whispers, the slights, the trip, and now this, crashed down on me. I wasn't a mother or a partner anymore. I was a burden, an inconvenience they had finally managed to discard on a train platform thousands of miles from home. I sank onto a nearby bench, the mountain of luggage standing as a monument to my humiliation. I don't know how long I sat there, lost in a fog of shock and grief. People swirled around me, a blur of motion and sound. I felt utterly, profoundly alone. My phone buzzed. It was a text from Chloe. "OMG, Mom, train left so fast. So sorry. Grab the next one. We're in car 3. See you in Monterosso. EXO." The casual cruelty of the EXO was like a final twist of the knife. As I stared blankly at the screen, a small, wrinkled hand touched my arm. I looked up into the face of an elderly Italian woman, her hair a cloud of white, her eyes dark and full of a deep, knowing compassion. She was dressed simply, in a black dress and comfortable shoes, carrying a cloth shopping bag. "Signora? Stai bene?" she asked, her voice soft and raspy. I didn't speak Italian, but I understood her question. "Are you okay?" I shook my head, and to my own surprise, A single tear traced a path down my cheek. I quickly wiped it away. She didn't pry or ask what was wrong. She simply sat down next to me on the bench. From her bag, she pulled out a small paper-wrapped package. She unwrapped it to reveal 2 almond biscotti. She held one out to me. I hesitated, then took it. She gestured to the luggage, then to me, and raised her eyebrows in a silent question. I just shook my head again, unable to form the words in any language. She nodded, as if she understood everything. She patted my hand, a simple, maternal gesture of comfort that I hadn't felt in years. We sat in silence for a few minutes, munching on our cookies. Then she stood up, pointed towards a cafe at the far end of the station, and said one word, "Cafe." It wasn't a question. It was a gentle command. She helped me hire a porter to move the luggage to the storage office, communicating with him in rapid, authoritative Italian. Then, she led me to the cafe, ordered us 2 espressos, and sat with me at a tiny table. We didn't talk. We couldn't. But in her quiet, dignified presence, something inside me began to shift. Her simple, unconditional act of kindness from a complete stranger was a stark contrast to the calculated cruelty of my own family. She wasn't using me. She wasn't managing me. She was just being with me. For the first time in a very long time, I felt seen. As I sipped the strong, bitter coffee, a new feeling began to bubble up beneath the pain. A cold, hard ember of resolve. I never went to Cinque Terre. I booked a flight home from Florence that same evening. I left the luggage, their luggage, in the station's storage. I sent one final text to the family group chat. "Something has come up. I'm returning to the States. Please handle your own arrangements." The flurry of confused, then indignant replies went unanswered. I turned my phone off. The 10-hour flight was a cocoon of clarity. The hurt was still there, a raw wound, but it was now overlaid with a layer of icy calm. They had forgotten who I was. It was time to remind them. The morning after I landed, I didn't call my children. I called David Young, our estate lawyer for the past 25 years. "Eleanor, I saw you were in Italy. Is everything all right?" His voice was warm, professional. "David, I need to understand the exact structure of the Richard and Eleanor Vance Living Trust, the one we established in 2008. There was a brief pause. "Of course. It's an irrevocable trust. You and Richard were co-trustees. With his legal incapacitation, as per the documentation we filed, you became the sole acting trustee. You have complete discretionary authority over all assets held within the trust." "And what assets are those?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. "Everything, Eleanor," he said, his voice steady. "The company shares, the brokerage accounts, the real estate portfolio, the primary residence. Everything was transferred into the trust to protect it. You have sole signature authority. The children are listed as beneficiaries, but distributions are entirely at your discretion as trustee." Entirely at my discretion. The words echoed in the quiet of my study. My children and their families had been living off allowances and dividends distributed from that trust. The down payments for their homes, the tuition for their children's private schools, the lease payments on their luxury cars, the membership fees for their country clubs. It all flowed from the trust. A trust that I and I alone now controlled. They thought they were inheriting Richard's money. They had forgotten it was also mine. More than that, they had forgotten that I was the one left in charge. "David," I said, my voice devoid of any tremor, "I want to suspend all distributions to the beneficiaries, effective immediately." Another pause, this one longer. "All of them?" David asked carefully. "All of them. The monthly allowances, the credit card payments linked to the trust accounts, everything. Please draft letters to Mark and Chloe informing them that, as trustee, I am restructuring the trust's distribution strategy to focus on long-term capital preservation. No further distributions will be made until further notice. Eleanor, this will have significant consequences for them." "I am aware," I said. "They are adults, David. It's time they understood the value of the assets they so freely enjoy, and it's time they remembered who built the damn thing." There was a hint of a smile in his voice when he replied, "I'll draft the letters this morning. Consider it done." When I hung up the phone, I didn't feel vengeful. I felt powerful, not because of the money, but because I was finally taking back the control they had so systematically tried to strip from me. I was no longer the keeper of the bags. I was the keeper of the entire kingdom. The fallout was nuclear. It took less than 48 hours. My phone, which I had turned back on, erupted. First came the confused texts, then the angry voicemails. Finally, the panicked, furious calls. I listened to a few of the voicemails, my expression unreadable. Mark's voice was tight with disbelief. "Mom, what the hell is this letter from David Young? There has to be a mistake. My mortgage payment is due. Call me. Now." Chloe's was tearful, hysterical. "Mom, my card was declined at Whole Foods, in front of everyone. How could you do this? What are we supposed to do? This is Dad's money. You have no right." Dad's money. Even now, they didn't get it. Brenda, of course, had to weigh in. She left a long, rambling message on my home answering machine, her voice dripping with sanctimonious rage. "Eleanor, I don't know what kind of game you're playing, but you are hurting your children. After all they've done for you, managing everything while you were struggling. To cut them off like this? It's cruel. Richard would be ashamed of you." I deleted the message without a flicker of emotion. Managing everything. The delusion was breathtaking. Through mutual acquaintances and the filtered gossip of old friends, I pieced together the tapestry of their unraveling. Mark had to pull his son out of the elite private high school. He put his ridiculously oversized SUV up for sale. Chloe and her husband had to cancel their annual ski trip to Aspen. Their curated Instagram feeds, once a constant stream of lavish dinners and designer purchases, fell silent. The most satisfying report came from a friend on the board of their country club. She called me, trying to sound sympathetic, but failing to hide her glee. "Eleanor, you will not believe it. The Vances are on the delinquent list. Their membership is suspended. Brenda was telling everyone at the tennis clinic that you'd had some sort of breakdown after Italy." A breakdown. I smiled. No, it wasn't a breakdown. It was a breakthrough. I watched it all from a serene distance. I didn't engage. I didn't explain. My silence was my power. For years, they had defined my reality with their words, their expectations, their subtle dismissals. Now, they were left in a vacuum, forced to confront a reality of their own making. A reality where actions have consequences. They thought I was a supporting character in their story, the tragic, wealthy widow. They were about to learn that I was the author, and I was starting a new chapter, one that didn't include them. The first thing I did was sell the house, the sprawling 10,000-square-foot monument to a life that no longer existed. It was filled with ghosts and expectations. The realtor was shocked. "But Mrs. Vance, this is your family home." "It's a house," I replied calmly, "and it's time for a new one." I bought a penthouse condominium downtown, a sleek, modern space with floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the entire city. It was all clean lines, open space, and light. There were no ghosts here. I filled it not with the heavy, dark wood furniture of my past, but with art I discovered in small local galleries, sculptures that made me think, and books. So many books. The second Tesla wasn't an impulse buy. The first one, a practical Model Y, was my daily driver. The second, a crimson-red roadster with breathtaking speed, was for me. It was a symbol. It was the thrill of the open road, the feeling of acceleration, the tangible proof that I was the one in the driver's seat. Sometimes, on a clear evening, I would drive it up the coast, with no destination in mind, the wind in my hair, feeling the sheer, unadulterated joy of being free. My days found a new rhythm, one dictated by my own desires. I enrolled in an intensive Italian course at the local university, determined to be fluent on my next trip, a trip I would plan myself. I bought a professional-grade camera and took up photography, finding a new way to see the world. I spent hours walking through the city, capturing the play of light on old brick, the candid expressions of strangers, the beauty in the mundane details everyone else rushed past. I reconnected with friends I had let drift away during the long years of Richard's illness and my all-consuming role as a caregiver. We had lunches that stretched for hours, filled with laughter and real conversation. They had known me as Eleanor, the coder, the strategist, the marathon runner. They saw me, not a role I was playing. One afternoon, a friend and I were having coffee when she asked, "Do you miss them? Your kids?" I considered the question honestly. "I miss the children they were," I said slowly. "I miss the family I thought we were. But the people they've become? No. I don't miss being invisible. I don't miss being tolerated. I'm done with that. I wasn't just rebuilding a life. I was excavating my own identity from beneath the rubble of other people's expectations. I was discovering that Eleanor Vance was not just a wife, a mother, or a trustee. She was a woman who loved Italian verbs, fast cars, abstract art, and the quiet satisfaction of a life lived entirely on her own terms. For 6 months, the silence was absolute. I enforced my boundaries, and they, caught in their own financial turmoil, seemed to have no time or energy to breach them. Then, one Tuesday evening, my phone lit up with a FaceTime request. The name on the screen made my heart do a painful little flip. Lily, my granddaughter, Mark's daughter. She was 15. I hesitated for a long moment, my thumb hovering over the accept button. This was the first crack in the wall I had so carefully built. With a deep breath, I answered. Her face filled the screen. She was in her bedroom, posters of bands I didn't recognize on the wall behind her. She looked older, her expression more somber than I remembered. "Grandma?" she said, her voice small. "Hi, sweetie," I said, trying to keep my own voice even and warm. "It's so good to see you." "You too." She bit her lip, and her eyes welled up. "I'm sorry to just call. Dad would kill me if he knew. He and Mom, they're different now." "Different how?" I asked gently. "They're always angry," she whispered, a tear escaping and rolling down her cheek. "They're always fighting about money. They sold the car I was supposed to learn to drive in. They're talking about moving, selling the house." She took a shaky breath. "They talk about you. They say you've lost your mind, that you're being selfish." I listened, my heart aching for her, for the child caught in the middle of a war she didn't start. "But I don't think that's true," Lily continued, her voice gaining a little strength. "I remember when Grandpa got sick. I remember you were with him all the time. You taught me how to make his favorite oatmeal. You never got mad when he didn't remember my name. You were just there for him." She paused, swiping at her tears. "I found some old magazines in the attic last week, from a long time ago. There were articles about you and Grandpa, about the company. One of them called you the quiet genius behind it all. I never knew that. Dad never talks about that part." My own eyes began to sting. I wanted to say, "I miss you, Grandma," she finished, her voice thick with emotion. "I miss you, and I think I understand. A little bit." The sincerity in her voice, the genuine effort to see me and understand, was more powerful than any apology from my own children could ever be. It was a bridge, fragile and tentative, extended from the one person in that family who was still capable of seeing beyond her own needs. I looked at my granddaughter's face on the screen, a face so full of youthful earnestness and pain, and I knew my response had to be as truthful and as loving as her call had been. This wasn't a moment for anger or for reciting a list of grievances. This was about honoring her courage and protecting my own hard-won peace. "Oh, Lily," I began, my voice softer than I intended. "Thank you for calling me. It means more than you can possibly know to hear your voice." I took a breath, choosing my words with care. "I miss you too, so much. And I want to be very clear about something. None of this is your fault. You are caught in something big and complicated, and my love for you has not changed one bit. It never will." She gave a watery smile, a look of immense relief on her face. "But I have to be honest with you, sweetie," I continued. "Your parents and your aunt and uncle hurt me very deeply. It wasn't just one thing. It was a long time of being made to feel small and invisible, right when I needed my family the most. The things that happened in Italy, they were a final straw for me. It showed me that they didn't respect me, not as a mother, and not as the partner who built everything alongside your grandfather." I let that sink in for a moment. The decisions I made about the trust weren't to be selfish or cruel. They were to protect myself and to make them understand that actions have consequences. You can't treat a person the way they treated me and still expect to benefit from that person's life's work. That isn't how respect works. It's not how love works. "So what happens now?" Lily asked, her voice barely a whisper. "What happens now," I said, feeling a sense of clarity settle over me, "is that you and I can have a relationship. Just us. We can have lunch. We can go to museums. You can come see my new apartment. I will always, always be your grandmother and be there for you. But my relationship with your parents needs time to heal, and they need to be the ones to start that process with a true understanding of what they did. Until then, my life is my own. I have to protect that." I looked out my penthouse window at the sparkling city lights below, a whole world waiting for me. I'm not the woman they left on that train platform anymore, Lily, I said, my voice firm and clear, not just for her, but for myself. I'm not a victim. I am not just a widow or a bank account. I am Eleanor. And for the first time in a very long time, I am free. If this story resonates with you, or if you've ever had to fight to reclaim your own narrative, please subscribe to the channel. Your strength deserves to be seen. And in the comments below, share one thing you've done just for yourself that made you feel free. Let's build a community of women living life on their own terms.